Welcome back, everyone. Before we dive in, make sure you drop your thoughts and the lessons you took from this story in the comments. And don't forget to like and subscribe. Let's get into it. I was wrapping up some work emails when my phone rang. The name on the screen made me pause. It was my wife, Tanisha, calling from her monthly girls' night at our neighbor's house across the cul-de-sac. I could already hear the wine-fueled laughter in the background before I even answered, the sound spilling through the speaker like I had walked into the middle of a party I had not been invited to in my own neighborhood. My name is Wesley Grant. I am 36 years old, and until that night, I still believe that even if my marriage was strained, it was at least private. "Hey, what is going on?" I said as I answered, expecting something ordinary. Maybe she needed me to pick something up, or she had forgotten her house key again. Instead of her usual voice, what came through was loud, dramatic, and projected, the tone she used when she wanted an audience. Ladies, quiet down. I am about to do something that has been a long time coming," Tanisha said. Only then did I realize I was on speakerphone. The laughter faded into a thick, expectant silence, and I could practically feel a room full of women leaning toward the phone. "Honey," she said, dragging out the word like she was on stage. "I have been thinking a lot lately, and I have made a decision. We are done forever. This marriage is over." For a few seconds, it felt like time stopped. The silence on both ends was heavy. Then came the gasps and soft exclamations from her audience. I heard one of her friends whisper, "Is she serious right now?" Tanisha did not take it back. She did not laugh and say it was a joke. She just let the silence sit there, waiting to see what I would do with it. This was not the first time she had turned our relationship into a performance for her friends. I had spent years listening to secondhand stories of how I was the bumbling husband who allegedly could not load the dishwasher, the man who supposedly did not understand her emotional needs, the boring spouse dragged behind her sophisticated tastes. Her friends would laugh, and she would soak in the attention, telling exaggerated versions of minor disagreements, as if they were comedic monologues. But this was different. This was not a joke about a forgotten anniversary. This was her publicly ending our marriage like it was a party game. I knew the room was waiting for my reaction. They probably expected me to beg, to ask what was wrong, to protest, to give them more drama to feed on. That was what Tanisha was counting on, a pleading, emotional husband, something they could retell later with wide eyes and sympathetic shakes of their heads. Instead, I kept my voice calm and even, the same tone I used on conference calls with clients. "Understood," I said. "Take care." Then I pressed the red button and ended the call. The house suddenly felt very quiet. I set my phone face down on the desk and stared at the glow of my laptop screen. My heart was beating faster than usual, but there was a strange steadiness under the rush of adrenaline. Tanisha had just announced the death of our marriage as entertainment for her friends. She had shown me exactly how much respect she had for me and for the vows we made. When someone tells you who they are, you are wise to believe them. I turned back to my computer, but I was no longer thinking about work. I opened a new browser window and logged into my banking applications. We had separate primary accounts, but Tanisha had access to one of my credit cards, one she used for her shopping trips and those expensive girls' nights. Her mother, Patricia, also had access to another card I had given her years ago for emergencies and her weekly grocery runs. At the time, it had felt generous and practical. That night, it felt like a direct pipeline out of my life. I exhaled slowly, clicked on account settings, and started making changes. Within 20 minutes, both cards were canceled. I removed Tanisha and her mother as authorized users anywhere their names appeared. I changed passwords, updated security questions, and contacted the bank to place a note on my profile, blocking any attempts to add new authorized users without my direct confirmation. Each click felt like closing a door I should have closed a long time ago. While I worked, my phone started buzzing on the desk. Text messages, incoming calls, more messages. I did not pick it up. For the first time in years, their urgency was not my problem. When I finished with the bank accounts, I moved on to the rest of the digital life Tanisha had been floating in on my dime. I logged into our shared streaming accounts: Netflix, Hulu, the music streaming service, the online shopping platform, where packages arrived every week like it was a permanent holiday. I changed all the passwords and removed her profiles. If she wanted entertainment and convenience, she could pay for her own. I even called the cable company and canceled the premium package she had insisted we needed for her reality television shows. Basic cable was more than enough for me. By the time I was done, it was close to midnight. The phone had buzzed so many times it had become background noise, a vibration I barely noticed. I had not read a single message. I pushed away from the desk, stretched, and walked to the kitchen. The house felt different, almost like the air had shifted. I realized how long I had been walking on eggshells, adjusting myself to avoid the next sarcastic comment she would make about me to someone else. That night, for the first time in a long time, I felt something I had almost forgotten: relief. I went to bed without checking my phone. I did not rehearse arguments or drafts of texts in my head. I did not strategize about how to fix what she had broken. She wanted to end the marriage for the sake of a dramatic moment in front of her friends. Fine. She could have a drama. What she would not have any longer was unfettered access to my resources and my peace. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, listening to the quiet, and wondered how long it had been since I had heard the house this still. Morning light came in soft through the blinds. I brewed coffee, took my mug to the dining table, and opened a news website. My phone was still on the desk in my home office, loaded with missed calls and messages. Halfway through my first cup, the phone started ringing again. I sighed, walked over to the desk, checked the caller identification, and felt my jaw tighten when I saw Patricia's name on the screen. This was the call I had actually been expecting. "Hello," I said, answering the call and bringing the phone to my ear. Patricia's voice burst through, high-pitched and furious. "What did you do?" she demanded before I could say another word. My car was declined at Target. The cashier had to void my entire transaction in front of everyone. Do you have any idea how humiliating that was? I took a slow sip of coffee with my free hand. "Good morning to you as well," I said in a calm tone. "Do not you dare take that tone with me," Patricia snapped. "The credit cards. Tanisha's car, my card. Dear Lord, what did you do?" I heard her speaking to someone in the background, her voice muffled. "He is on the phone now. He is being difficult." Then she came back. "Tanisha is asking what happened to the accounts." I leaned against the counter. "She ended our marriage last night publicly for entertainment," I said. I simply took her at her word and acted accordingly. There was stunned silence on the line. I could hear faint argument in the background, Patricia and Tanisha talking over each other. Finally, Patricia came back. "She says it was just girl talk," Patricia insisted. "You cannot just cut off family like that." I let out a short breath. "I'm not family anymore," I said. "Remember?" She made that very clear to a room full of people. Before Patricia could respond, I ended the call and blocked her number. Then I blocked Tanisha's. My phone showed 17 missed calls and 43 unread messages. I put face down again. Around noon, I saw a car pull into the driveway. I recognized the silver sedan immediately. I watched from the living room window as Tanisha got out, her movements sharp and frantic. She walked quickly to the front door, pulled out her key, and tried to unlock it. Her frown deepened when the key did not turn. I had called a locksmith first thing that morning and had the locks changed. She tried the key again, harder. Then again. When it still did not work, she started pounding on the door. "I know you are in there," Tanisha shouted. "We need to talk, Wesley. Open the door." I considered leaving her out there, but I wanted this conversation controlled and direct. I opened the door just enough to stand in the doorway, blocking her path. She looked exhausted, her makeup smudged, hair disheveled, still wearing the same clothes from the night before. Her eyes narrowed when she saw me. "What is wrong with you?" she demanded. "You have humiliated me in front of everyone." I almost laughed at the projection. "I have humiliated you?" I asked. "You announced our divorce to a room full of people like it was some kind of comedy routine. You humiliated yourself." She rolled her eyes and waved a hand as if my feelings were background noise. "It was not serious," Tanisha said. "The girls were talking about their relationships, and things got heated. I just got caught up in the moment." Her tone suggested I was overreacting to a minor slip of the tongue. "So our 7-year marriage is just something you get caught up about when you need material for your friends?" I asked. I moved my weight forward slightly, keeping the doorway blocked. "It was not like that," she said quickly. "You are being dramatic. Open the door and let me come inside so we can talk." She tried to push past me, but I stepped sideways and began to close the door. "You cannot keep me out of my own home," she snapped. "This is my house, too." I shook my head. "The deed is in my name," I said. "I bought this house before we married." You wanted out of this marriage, so you were out of everything that comes with it. Panic flickered across her face. But where am I supposed to go? Tanisha asked, her voice climbing in pitch. My mother is furious with me. I cannot afford my own place right now. Tears filled her eyes, glistening at the corners. Once that would have undone me. Now, I saw the timing too clearly. It sounds like that is something you should have considered before your little performance last night, I said. The tears began to fall, but there was a stiffness to them, a practice pattern I had seen many times. Tanisha had used tears as a tool for years, a switch she flipped when she needed to reset an argument or shift blame. She softened her voice. Please, Wesley, she said, just let me come inside so we can talk about this like adults. We can work this out. Adults do not publicly humiliate their spouses for laughs, I said. Adults do not treat their marriages like reality television. I started to close the door again. She quickly jammed her foot into the gap. You are being ridiculous, Tanisha said sharply. Just because I said some things when I was drinking does not mean I actually want a divorce. I looked down at her foot, then back at her. You did not just say some things, I answered. You put me on speakerphone and announced to a room full of people that our marriage was over forever. Those were your words, not mine. Fine, she said suddenly, wiping her cheeks with the back of her hand. I am sorry. There. I apologized. Now let me in. The entitlement in her voice was startling. It was as if every line she had crossed could be reset with a single word. An apology does not undo this, I said. You chose to end our marriage as entertainment for your friends. I am simply honoring your decision. Her expression shifted from desperate to angry in a heartbeat. This is insane, Tanisha said. You cannot just decide our marriage is over because of one stupid comment. I opened the door enough to meet her eyes fully. I did not decide anything, I said. You did. Last night, in front of your friends. I am just the one taking it seriously. She finally moved her foot, and I closed the door. Through the side window, I watched her stand on the porch for almost 10 minutes, alternately crying, pacing, and talking on her phone. Eventually, she walked back to her car and drove away. When the house was quiet again, I sat back at the table with my coffee. There was one more step I needed to take if I wanted to make sure this was handled properly. I opened my laptop and looked up a family law firm downtown. The website showed a row of serious faces and a list of services. I called the main number and scheduled a consultation for the next morning. The receptionist's voice was professional and calm. She asked a few basic questions, then gave me the appointment time. I hung up and felt another subtle weight lift from my shoulders. The next morning, the law office was exactly what I expected. Neutral beige walls, framed diplomas, a receptionist with a calm demeanor, and a quiet hum of printers in the background. I sat in a leather chair in the waiting area, holding a folder with printed bank statements and a list of assets. When my name was called, I followed an assistant down a hallway to a private office. The attorney, a man in his 50s named Thomas Hayes, stood to shake my hand. So, Mr. Grant, he said, tell me what brings you in today. I sat down and placed a folder on his desk. My wife announced our divorce last night over speakerphone at a neighbor's house, I said evenly. She did it in front of a room full of her friends. She said we were done forever, that the marriage was over. I told her I understood and hung up. I am here because I want a clean separation of assets, with everything done by the book. Hayes raised his eyebrows slightly, but did not look surprised. So she announced the divorce publicly, and you're taking her at her word, he said, repeating my summary. Exactly, I said. I want a clean separation. No joint debts. No shared responsibilities. She wanted out, so she gets out completely. Hayes flipped open a legal pad and began taking notes. Any children? He asked. No, I replied. Any shared property beyond the marital home? The house is in my name only, I said. I bought it before we got married. Both cars are in my name. She has her personal belongings and her individual checking account, which, as of last week, held about $200. Hayes paused, pen hovering over the page. Does she work? He asked. Part-time retail job at the mall, I said. Maybe 15 hours a week. She has always said my income was enough for both of us. He nodded slowly. Well, he said, that is about to change. He explained the process, the paperwork, the waiting periods, and the possible responses from her side. I answered his questions, handed over copies of my statements, and signed the documents he placed in front of me. When I left his office, I felt more confident than I had in a long time. When I pulled into the driveway later that day, Tanisha was waiting by the front walk. She had clearly put effort into her appearance this time. Full makeup, hair done, a fitted dress she knew I liked, heels that clicked sharply on the pavement as she walked toward my car. The manipulation playbook was open to a fresh page. I stepped out and closed the car door behind me. "We really need to talk," she said, her tone soft and pleading. "I've been thinking about everything, and I realize how wrong I was." "There is nothing to talk about," I replied. "I have a follow-up meeting with my attorney this afternoon to finalize some paperwork." Her face drained of color. "Attorney," she repeated. "You are actually serious about this?" I met her eyes. "You announced that our marriage was over forever," I said. "I believed you. Why would I not be serious?" She reached for my arm, her fingers curling around my sleeve. "I was drunk," she said. "The girls were being dramatic about their own relationships, and I got caught up in it. You know how it is with wine and group mentality." I stepped back, pulling my arm out of her grasp. "So you were saying you only disrespect me when you are drinking with your friends," I said. "That is supposed to make me feel better?" "That is not what I meant," she insisted, her voice tightening. "I meant I was not thinking clearly. People say things they do not mean all the time." "Not about their marriage," I said quietly. "Not on speakerphone. Not for entertainment." Her eyes filled with tears again. "Please do not do this to us," she said. "We can work through this. Maybe counseling, maybe a reset. We have been together for 7 years. You cannot just walk away over one bad night." "There is no us anymore," I said. "You ended that at our neighbor's house. Remember? We are done forever. This marriage is over." Those were your lines, not mine. The tears stopped almost instantly, replaced by a flare of anger that felt more honest than anything she had said all day. "You are being completely unreasonable," Tanisha said. "It was one mistake." "No," I said. "Marrying someone who treats their spouse like a punchline for their friends is the mistake. Last night was the moment I finally accepted that." She shifted tactics again, her voice becoming practical, transactional. "Even if you want space, you cannot just throw me out with nowhere to go," she said. "I need time to figure out where to live, what to do. You cannot just shut me out entirely. You should have figured those things out before you decided to end our marriage for laughs," I said. "Where am I supposed to live?" she demanded. "My mother is barely speaking to me after what happened with the credit cards. She says I brought this on myself. I cannot stay with friends forever." I shrugged slightly. "That sounds like a problem you're going to have to solve," I said. "It is not my responsibility anymore." Her expression hardened. The mask slipped completely. "You cannot just destroy my life because your feelings are hurt," Tanisha said. "I'm not destroying anything," I replied. "I'm simply acknowledging the reality you created. You wanted to be single and dramatic for your friends. Congratulations. You got what you wanted." She stared at me, breathing hard. "This is ridiculous," she said finally. "You know, I did not really want a divorce. I just said it in the moment." "What I know," I said, "is that when you had the choice between respecting your husband and entertaining your friends, you chose entertainment. That tells me everything I need to know about your priorities." As I started toward the front door, she grabbed my arm again. "I will not sign anything," she said. "You cannot force me to get divorced." I turned to face her fully. "Actually, I can," I said. "It is called irreconcilable differences. Your public announcement last night, with multiple witnesses, makes this very straightforward." "You are bluffing," she said, trying to sound confident. I pulled out my phone and tapped the screen to show her my recent calls. "I have already filed the initial paperwork," I said. "You will be served within 48 hours. Her face crumpled. "You cannot be serious," she whispered. "Over one stupid night. One night where you publicly humiliated your husband for entertainment," I said. "Yes, I am serious about that." "But I love you," she said, almost urgently. "You love the lifestyle I provided," I replied. "You love having someone to pay your bills while you work 15 hours a week. You love having someone to mock when your friends need a news story. You do not love me." She stood speechless as I walked past her and went into the house. Through the front window, I watched her stand in the driveway for several minutes, then finally get into her car and drive away. 3 days later, the divorce papers were served at her retail job at the mall. I was not there to see it, but in a town like ours, news travels quickly. By the time I stopped at the hardware store that afternoon to pick up some supplies, the cashier was giving me a sympathetic look. "I heard you were going through a rough patch," he said quietly as he scanned my purchases. "My wife mentioned some drama at girls' night." I nodded once. "Just taking care of some overdue business," I said. As the days passed, the truth began spreading through our social circle, and it was not the version Tanisha had hoped would take root. She had clearly expected people to rally around her as the wounded wife, abandoned by a husband who overreacted. Instead, her own friends started telling their husbands what had actually happened. One afternoon at the grocery store, I ran into Rochelle, one of the women from that girl's night. She hesitated before walking up to me in the produce aisle. "Hey, Wesley," she said softly. "I just wanted to say I'm sorry about what happened the other night. That was really uncomfortable for everyone." I picked up an apple and checked it for bruises. "I appreciate you saying that," I replied. Rochelle shifted her weight, clearly uneasy. "For what it is worth," she said, "most of us thought she went way too far. Nobody knew she was going to put you on speaker like that. It felt wrong." I studied her expression and saw genuine regret there. "But nobody stopped her," I said. Rochelle sighed. "You are right," she admitted. "We should have. It just happened so fast. And then when you hung up, she started crying and saying she did not mean it." I nodded slowly. "Interesting," I said. "She seemed very confident when she was performing it for you all." Rochelle gave a small, sad smile. "That is exactly what it felt like," she said. "A performance. Like she was trying to outdo everyone else's relationship drama. It did not feel like a real conversation with a husband. It felt like she was trying to win something." Later that week, I received a call from my brother-in-law, Leonard, who was married to Tanisha's sister, Valerie. "Man, what in the world happened?" Leonard asked as soon as I answered. "She has been calling my wife nonstop, saying you have lost your mind, that you are tearing the family apart." I exhaled through my nose. "She announced our divorce publicly for entertainment," I said. I took her seriously. "Now she's upset that there are consequences." "Wait," Leonard said. "She actually said she wanted a divorce." "Word for word," I replied. "We are done forever. This marriage is over." On speakerphone, in front of witnesses. There was a long pause on the line. "Now she's saying you overreacted," Leonard said slowly. "That is her current story," I answered. "But I have nothing to gain by lying about what she said. You can talk to Rochelle or any of the other women who were there." Leonard was quiet for a moment. "I believe you," he said finally. "I'm sorry, man. My wife has been feeling bad for her. But if that is what really happened." After that call, Valerie stopped returning Tanisha's messages. The family support Tanisha had counted on began to evaporate as people heard the full details instead of the edited version. A few days later, Patricia called again from a different number I had not yet blocked. Her tone was tired rather than angry this time. "I need to understand what happened," she said. "She's been staying here for a week, crying constantly, saying you have turned everyone against her." "I have not turned anyone against her," I said. "I have not said anything that is not true. She ended our marriage publicly. I accepted it. Now she wants to pretend it never happened." Patricia let out a long breath. "Surely you two can work this out," she said. "Young people say things that do not mean all the time." "She is 32 years old," I replied. "That is old enough to be accountable for her words and actions." This was not a slip in a private argument. This was deliberate humiliation for effect. "She made a mistake," Patricia insisted. "She made a choice," I said. "A very public, very deliberate choice to humiliate her husband for her friend's entertainment." There was a long pause. "What do you want from her?" Patricia asked finally. "Nothing," I said. "I want her to live with the consequences of her decision and stop trying to manipulate everyone into believing she is the victim in this scenario." Patricia's voice softened. "She is my daughter," she said quietly. "I have to help her." "That is your choice," I said. "But helping her avoid accountability is not really helping her." After that call, even Patricia's tone changed in the occasional messages that slipped through before I blocked new numbers. She no longer sounded outraged on Tanisha's behalf. She sounded tired, resigned, like someone slowly realizing that their child's version of events did not line up with the facts. Meanwhile, my own life began to improve in small but unmistakable ways. I started going to the gym again, something I had stopped doing because Tanisha always complained about the time it took and the cost of the membership. I began sleeping better. The constant tension that had settled into my shoulders over the years started to ease. I cooked simple dinners for myself, without worrying whether Tanisha would mock the menu in front of her friends. The financial stress that had quietly become normal vanished almost overnight without her shopping sprees, spa treatments, and regular nights out. I looked at my account balances and saw numbers moving up instead of down. I began to realize just how much of my energy had been spent managing her chaos. I also reconnected with friends I had slowly lost over the course of the marriage. Guys from work who had stopped inviting me to weekend barbecues, because Tanisha always found a way to make the event about herself, or to complain that I was leaving her alone. Old college friends who had given up on maintaining contact, because every gathering with us turned into a stage for Tanisha's commentary. When I reached out to them and suggested meeting for lunch or watching a game, their surprise was followed quickly by genuine warmth. The house itself felt different, too. The living room was no longer a set where I worried about what might be said about me the next time she had friends over. I could watch what I wanted on television without being told my choices were boring. I could decide to go for a walk or sit on the back porch with a book without having to defend the decision. Weekends stopped feeling like a minefield of unpredictable moods and manufactured drama, and started feeling like time that belonged to me again. One afternoon at the bank, the teller glanced up from my account screen and smiled. "People have been asking about you," she said. "They're saying you handled a difficult situation with a lot of class." I shrugged lightly. "I just took someone at their word," I said. "Well," she replied, "it is refreshing to see someone who does not put up with disrespect." It was a simple comment, but it underscored what I was gradually seeing everywhere. People were not shocked that I left. They were surprised I stayed as long as I did. A few weeks into the process, I saw Tanisha at the mall where she worked. She was behind the counter at a clothing store, her shoulders slightly hunched, dark circles visible beneath her makeup. She saw me as I walked past. For a moment, our eyes met. She took a step toward the entrance, clearly intending to intercept me. I gave her a polite nod, nothing more, and kept walking. No confrontation, no raised voices, no scene. Later, I heard from a mutual acquaintance that she had broken down, crying in the stockroom after that. 2 weeks after that, I was having lunch at a small restaurant downtown that we used to visit together on Sundays. It had become my regular spot again, a quiet place where I could sit at a corner table, read, and enjoy a meal. The dining room was crowded with the after-church crowd, people we both knew scattered among the tables. I was halfway through my sandwich when I saw her walk in. This was not an accident. She was dressed carefully, hair styled, makeup perfect, her expression set in a look of determined vulnerability. She glanced around, spotted me, and headed directly toward my table. "What a surprise seeing you here," Tanisha said, loud enough for nearby tables to hear. "Mind if I sit down?" I gestured to the empty chair across from me. "It is a free country," I said. She sat quickly, folding her hands together on the table like she was about to deliver speech. "I've been doing a lot of thinking these past few weeks," she said, projecting her voice just enough that several heads turned. "I realize how much I have missed you." Conversations around us began to quiet. She knew exactly what she was doing, using the public setting as subtle leverage. "Have you?" I asked, taking a calm sip of coffee. "Yes," she said, her voice growing more emotional. "I think we should try to work things out. What happened that night was a huge mistake, and I have learned from it. I love you so much, and I know we can get past this if we just try. Please do not throw away 7 years of marriage over one bad night." The tears started to form, glistening at the edges of her eyes. She was putting on a performance again, but this time with a different script. Remorse instead of bravado, pleading instead of mockery. I set my cup down, folded my hands, and looked directly at her. "Let me make sure I understand this correctly," I said, my voice clear enough for anyone listening nearby. "You want to reconcile with the man you publicly announced you were divorcing forever. The man whose marriage you ended for entertainment value, in front of a room full of witnesses." Her face flushed as the words landed not only on her, but on every table within earshot. This was not the reaction she had expected. "That was a mistake," she said, her voice shrinking. "No," I replied. "Forgetting to pick up milk at the store is a mistake. What you did was make a deliberate choice to humiliate your husband for laughs. There's a difference." The restaurant grew noticeably quieter. People were no longer pretending not to listen. They were openly paying attention. Please just give us another chance, Tanisha said, tears now sliding down her cheeks. I promise I will never do anything like that again. Just like you promised to love and honor me when we got married. I asked, how did that promise turn out? She blinked, thrown off balance. She had counted on public sympathy, on the image of a crying woman begging a cold man for forgiveness. Instead, she was confronting the reality of her own actions in front of the same kind of audience she had once played to. You cannot be serious about ending our marriage over this, she said. I'm not ending anything, I replied. You already did that. Remember? We are done forever. This marriage is over. Those were your exact words. I just had the courtesy to believe you. She glanced around at the other tables, looking for someone to step in or at least send her a sympathetic glance. What she found instead were thoughtful, uneasy expressions, people reassessing everything they had heard about us. But I have been drinking, she said desperately. People say things they do not mean when they are drinking. So you are telling me alcohol makes you disrespect your husband, I said. That is your defense. That you only humiliate me for an audience when you have had a few glasses of wine. Her tears intensified, but there was a mechanical quality to them now, a sense of a tactic failing. Please do not do this to me, she said. I cannot manage without you. I cannot keep up with the bills on my own. I am trying, but it is too much. You should have thought about that before you decided our marriage was comedy material for your friends, I said. I reached for my wallet, placed money on the table to cover my meal and tip, and stood. I hope you find whatever it is you're actually looking for, I said, but it is not going to be with me. As I walked toward the door, I heard her crying behind me. I also heard the low murmur of conversations resuming. In that soft murmur, I caught fragments. Did she really announce their divorce at a party? Someone whispered. That is terrible, another voice answered. Poor man. Who does that to espouse? The narrative she had been trying to push, cruel husband, wounded wife, crumbled in real time. By the time I stepped out into the sunlight of the parking lot, the story had shifted not because I had argued louder, but because the truth had finally been spoken clearly. Tanisha followed me outside, away from the audience. The change in her demeanor was immediate. The tears dried up, her posture stiffened. You are a bastard, she hissed, her voice low but sharp. You made me look like an idiot in there. You made yourself look like an idiot, I said. I just answered your questions honestly. Nobody is going to want anything to do with me after this, she said. That is not my responsibility, I replied. You created this situation. I hate you, she shouted suddenly, loud enough for a couple walking to their car to turn and look. I glanced at the onlookers, then back at her. And there's the real you, I said calmly. The one who hates her husband when she does not get her way. I am grateful I do not have to live with that anymore. I unlocked my car, got in, and closed the door. As I drove away, I saw her in the rearview mirror, standing in the parking lot, hands clenched at her sides. Her attempt to orchestrate a dramatic public reconciliation had backfired in the most complete way possible. She had hoped to pressure me into taking her back by leveraging public sympathy. Instead, she had handed me the perfect opportunity to lay out the facts in front of the same kind of audience she once used against me. The game she had been playing with our marriage as her favorite storyline was finally over, and she was the one who had dealt the losing card. 3 months later, the divorce was finalized. I sat in Attorney Hayes' office, signing the last of the paperwork. Clean separation, he said, sliding the final pages across the desk. She gets her personal belongings and whatever was in her individual accounts. You keep the house, both vehicles, and all other assets. No alimony, no shared debts. I signed my name with a steady hand, and she agreed to all of this. I asked. Eventually, he said. Her attorney advised her that fighting it would be expensive and futile, especially given the circumstances of how the marriage ended. I walked out of that office feeling lighter than I had in years. The weight I had been carrying, the constant tension, the financial pressure, the quiet fear of what story she might tell next, was gone. My ex-wife's life, from what I heard, took a very different path. Without access to my income, she had been forced to find full-time work. A friend mentioned that she was working 2 jobs just to afford a studio apartment across town. Her mother, exhausted by months of drama, had finally given her an ultimatum about becoming self-sufficient. The social consequences had been lasting as well. Her girls' night group had quietly stopped inviting her to gatherings. Nobody wanted to be around someone who treated other people's relationships as fuel for entertainment and weaponized their own in the same way. Trust, once broken in that fashion, does not slide back into place. Her work friends kept their distance to avoid being pulled into the chaos. Even family members who loved her had stepped back, unwilling to co-sign a narrative that did not match what they had seen and heard for themselves. I saw her a few times around town after that, always from a distance. Each time, she looked older than her 32 years, the strain visible around her eyes and mouth. The easy, performative confidence she once wore like a second skin was gone, replaced by a sharper, more defensive edge. Meanwhile, my life had transformed quietly but completely. I had dropped 15 pounds at the gym, was eating better, and slept through the night more often than not. I started planning small vacations for myself, something I had not been able to justify before when I was supporting two people on one income and funding someone else's constant appetites. I reconnected with hobbies I had abandoned, playing basketball with friends on Saturday mornings, working on small woodworking projects in the garage, taking long drives with no destination except a quiet mind. The house that had once felt tense and unpredictable now felt like a sanctuary. 6 months after that night, I ran into Rochelle again at a coffee shop downtown. She approached my table with a hesitant smile, a paper cup in her hands. "I heard the divorce went through," she said. "I just wanted you to know that we all felt terrible about that night. We should have stopped her before she went that far." I shook my head. "Water under the bridge," I said. "But I appreciate you saying that." "For what it is worth," Rochelle added, "I think you handled everything with a lot of grace. Most men I know would have made it ugly. You could have screamed on the phone that night, or shown up at the neighbor's house and caused a scene." I shrugged. "There was no point in that," I said. "She showed me who she really was. Once I believed her, everything else was just paperwork." Rochelle nodded slowly, absorbing that. "She has been reaching out to some of us," she said, "trying to rebuild friendships, but it is hard to trust her after something like that." "That is understandable," I said. She studied me for a moment. "Are you doing all right?" she asked. "You look really good." Calmer. I thought about how to answer and realized I did not have to embellish or pretend. "I'm doing very well," I said simply. And I meant it. That night at the neighbor's house, when Tanisha had put me on speaker and declared that we were done forever, had felt like the beginning of the end. In reality, it had been the beginning of something else entirely. She had wanted drama, suspense, and applause. She had wanted to be the lead actress in a story where everyone looked at her with pity and admiration. Instead, her script had collapsed under the weight of its own cruelty. She had lost her marriage, her financial security, and large pieces of her social circle. I had gained something I had not realized I was missing until I had it back. A life where my dignity was non-negotiable, where my peace was not a prop for someone else's performance. As I drove home that evening, the sun was setting in bands of orange and gold over the rooftops of our quiet American town. I thought about that moment months earlier when my phone had rung and I had heard the laughter in the background. I remembered the silence after her announcement, the expectation in the air, the hope that I would beg and plead and provide another act for their show. I had answered with 3 simple words and a click. "Understood. Take care." In the end, that was what set everything in motion. Not a grand speech or an emotional outburst, but a calm decision to believe what I was hearing and act accordingly. Tanisha had wanted to turn my life into a story for her friends. She got her story, but not the ending she expected. She had tried to reduce our marriage to a spectacle. In doing so, she had given me something she never intended: a clear view of the truth and the freedom to build a quieter, better life beyond her spotlight. If you enjoyed this story, please like, comment, and share this video with your friends. Subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a powerful story drop.